question, Sam. By the way, welcome to the Rainer on Leadership podcast. Thank you for being there at YouTube. Hi, and thank you for listening on your favorite podcasting app. Hey, if you're at YouTube, subscribe. Tell us you love us. Do the same thing if you are at listening to a podcast. Give us a rating and review. You may be listening to us natively at Church Answers, but wherever you are, thank you for doing that. Okay, Sam, I got a question on this. What area of ministry is typically the least budgeted or the lowest budgeted relative to its importance? Any way you want to do it, misaligned priority of a church.
Well, I see the word in the title of the episode, so I'm going to go with evangelism.
Yes, but because it is for now, we're going to call it evangelism in the 21st century, is not allocated.
Which, by the way, for our listeners, that was my dad's first book. And the foreword, not forward, forward.
The foreword.
Yeah, common mistake when you're writing a manuscript, forward. The foreword was written by Billy Graham, but it really wasn't. It was written by you and then signed off by Billy Graham, right?
Well, he agreed to do the forward, and it just didn't come in. So I finally said, hey, here's a draft. Can you consider it? He said, that's good. And somewhere, Sam, somewhere in all of my piles of collectibles that I have, papers and everything, and I haven't organized them well, is that letter from Billy Graham saying, that's fine, Tom.
Really? I've never seen that. I would absolutely love to see that. That's one thing of Tom Rainer memorabilia I have not had a chance to lay eyes on.
Wait a minute. You've already gotten one. It's already been given to you.
No,
Rick Warren's toilet tissue.
Yes, that is my favorite material possession for many, many reasons. When Rick Warren was in your office, you had a bathroom in your office. Mm-hmm. And when he was in your office,
I had a bathroom adjacent to my office. Can I just say that? I didn't have a commode.
Yeah, it's kind of weird if it was in your office. Yeah, it was a part of your office. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, how you doing? I'm doing fine. No, he after utilizing the facilities, he signed the toilet paper that was in there, not the used toilet paper,
the clean toilet paper,
the clean toilet paper, and you had it framed.
I did,
and I just thought that was the funniest thing. And I have that. I am that is my proudest possession.
Well, and I don't think we'll say what he wrote on it not because it's nasty or vulgar, but because it may create some divisiveness among sports fans.
It has something to do with a college football rivalry. Yes.
Yes.
And we don't need to alienate any of our listeners.
Exactly.
But no, it was not crude or rude or anything like that. But yeah, we just don't want to go down that road.
But back to where you were. How to create a useful evangelism budget in your church. Love this. I know you created the content for it, but absolutely love this. Hey, I don't want us to forget before we get too far into this podcast, what California Baptist University is offering. So think about it, Sam. You talk about how young your church has gotten. We just did a webinar recently, and tell us the age of where the age of your church is right now.
35% of our church is 18 and under, or they're high school age and younger. So under 18.
So theoretically, you have a lot of people in your church that could take advantage of this offer from California Baptist. And basically, you say, okay, you can get credit as a high schooler. A lot of other universities do that as well. That you can do that here. But here's the kicker. First course is free, absolutely zero. Second course, instead of paying $613 per credit hour, you pay $166, and you can get up to 30 available courses doing that. I mean, you can.
It's a great program.
It really is. California Baptist University, you can use those credits to go to California Baptist. We love the school. It's a beautiful location in Riverside, California. Or in most cases, you can use your courses and transfer them into another school. You'd have to ask the school where you're going to if they will accept it, but most of them will, especially the courses that are being offered at CBU. So just wanted to let you know that if it's a public school, private school, Christian school, homeschool kid, sophomore, junior, senior, tell them about this program so they get a head start on their college right away. I can see your daughter Maggie doing something like this.
She's not quite there yet, but it is definitely something that would be of interest to me and my family, certainly.
Well, let's thank California Baptist. Now, let's go to this podcast, How to Create a Useful Evangelism Budget for Your Church. You have brought up some enlightening points on this. I'll let you lead it, beginning with point number 1.
Yeah, there are a lot of churches that give to missions through the operating budget. That's common. A lot of churches try to get to that. Dad, I guess the typical figure is 10%. 10% of the operating budget goes to
It goes
missions.
along with the concept of the tithe for the individual.
Yeah, and I like that. I think it's a good goal. I don't know that it needs to be the standard of health because there's so many nuances there. But I think it's a great goal and it's a good thing
Agreed.
to do. Our church kind of has that target of 10% to missions, so we do that as well. But what about budgeting funds for the work of evangelism in the local community? I don't think many churches do that at all. There's plenty of churches that give to missions, but then they don't resource evangelism. Why is that, Dad? Why do you think that is?
Because it is harder to get people into local evangelism than it is for them to give their money for someone else to do evangelism beyond your local community. And I don't want to be cynical and say it's easier to pay for someone else to do evangelism than do it yourself, but many people have that perception. It is just easier for me if I just give the money and let someone else do it. It's kind of like paying the pastor's salary, so he'll do the evangelism part. Similar concept.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I don't want to be cynical about it either, because a lot of people give to missions with very good intentions. And a lot of churches give to missions with very good intentions. So we don't want to diminish that. We're just saying that there is a huge hole in this practice. So, one of the things that stands out to me, and when we do a lot of consultations, is the budget of a church is a great place to determine what the priorities of the church are.
Exactly.
You just take a look at the budget and you'll begin to get a picture of what that church values. And the thing is a lot of churches may not even know what they value in the budget. They just, a lot of times this is what we've always done. And this is just kind of how things are.
Right.
But I hope churches begin to take a deeper look at their budgets, because things like children's ministry and student ministry often are very, very small relative to other ministries. People wonder why don't we have young people in this church? Well, are you trying to reach them? Are you resourcing them? Why does our church not do evangelism? Are you providing funds for evangelism? And Dad, we've got some great resources at Church Answers to help churches do this.
I am so incredibly proud of our team and the number of resources that we have where we're making a statement. We'll come alongside churches and we'll provide you resources. And I got to say, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the Good News Neighbors resource, man, that is just out of the park. We offered it in a webinar not too long ago. The response was great. It's a concept that you do in your church. I'm not going to necessarily say you originated in your church, because there could be some other somewhere, but that you have really emphasized in your church. I know a guy that I coach, or you know him well, Justin Gatlin. They do something similar. They I think he probably got it from you, and they have something to give out. But just as an example, tell us about the Good News Neighbor resource that we have at Church Answers and how you use it in your church.
Yeah, it's a very simple concept. You put something tangible in the hands of your people to get into the neighborhood. And that's what the resource teaches you how to do. So it could be a gift bag, it could be any number of things, but you hand things out to your people, and then your people take this physical gift to their neighbors. So it's just a lot easier to invite somebody to church if you're bringing them something nice. Say, hey, here's a gift. Our church is doing this event, or whatever it is. We'd love for you to come. And oh, by the way, here's a gift. And we kind of talk about how to connect in the resource. We talk about how to connect all the dots and how to do this in the best strategic way. But yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to the Good News Neighbors Toolkit. And you talk about resourcing things. This is a very inexpensive resource that you get a lifetime license for. So you buy this once and you're done. And You can use it as much as you like. So that's just one example of many. It's one thing that I love what we do at Church Answers is we give practical resources and practical help for people.
And we try to save on their budget too by making them so affordable.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. If evangelism is the priority, then the church should fund that work. If you don't have an evangelism line item or some variation of that in your church budget, it's time to look into that. It's time to start funding and resourcing the work. There's, you could, you talk about buying Bibles. Some people still do Bible tracts. Some might debate as to whether that's still a valid form or not, depending on how you do it, I guess. Gifts for these gift bags. You say, what would you use the money on? Well, I mean, there's plenty of things that you would purchase in order to do this work. And oh, by the way, when we're talking about giving gifts, give nice ones, please. Was it chinchy? Don't go chinchy. I think that's the word, and I think I'm pronouncing it right. Some people say chintzy, but I think they're two separate words that mean roughly the same thing.
Okay. I don't know.
I think it's chinchy. Yeah, don't go chinchy on people.
Okay, well, here's what we're saying in essence biblically. For many churches, Acts 1:8 does not say, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem. It just gets beyond that. You'll be my witnesses beyond our local community. But if you're not funding evangelism for your local community, you're essentially saying the first city that Jesus mentioned, the first geographic location, is not valid. You're not
do you know what the definition? Do you know what the definition of chinchy is?
I do not.
Embarrassingly stingy. I was not off with that word. There you go. Don't be embarrassingly stingy.
It's really bad that someone that I knew in seminary named Glenn, that face came to mind immediately when you said that.
So you think of being embarrassingly stingy, and you actually get a face associated with that.
Oh gosh, I got stories. I've got stories.
It sounds like you do, and particularly because this was from seminary. How many years ago was this? How many decades ago was this?
Well, I finished my PhD in '88, so this continued, and I did my MDiv with him, so 84, 85, and in that range. So yeah, it's been a long time ago. I'm not gonna give his last name, but if you're listening, Glenn, I've told you, you are
stop being chinchy.
Yes.
All right. So when you do this evangelism budget, break it up into thirds. Think of 3 categories, and these, it depends on how you do your budget and how you do your line items, but training people is the first category. Digital resources is the second category, like Good News Neighbors. There's a lot of them out there, but training people, digital resources, and then actual gifts for neighbors. That's kind of how we think about things at West Bradenton. Is we need to get our people trained, and that could include some food. By the way, we're going to have snacks. We're going to have this training event. We're going to show hospitality to our own people to get them equipped. So training people, and then you have to purchase the digital resource. And then, a significant portion needs to go to these gifts because we don't want to be embarrassingly stingy.
In February next month, you are going to introduce the Hope Initiative to your church leadership at the very least. And the Hope Initiative is the fastest growing resource to train and prepare your people with a right culture for evangelism. And so we've got the Good News Neighbor, we've got the Hope Initiative. That 1-2 punch, if you're doing both of those, man, and it's a lifetime license as well. So anyway, I'm getting on our resources too much. The idea is evangelism.
Yeah, and you could start small. By the way, starting small is better than not starting at all. So you may say, well, I'm just going to try one thing. Great. That's better than not doing anything. But I recommend, if you're just getting started and your church is struggling with outreach or evangelism, by the way, evangelism is always outreach. Outreach is not always evangelism. Evangelism is vocalizing and sharing your faith. Outreach could be just serving your community. Both are outwardly focused, but a lot of people say outreach and evangelism synonymously. I don't mind that. I'm not personally offended, but I just want to clarify that evangelism specifically is you sharing your faith with another person. Outreach could be any outward movement of the church.
Mhm.
But I would recommend 4 emphases a year, 4 times that you're doing outreach and or evangelism.
So
Particularly if you're not in the regular rhythm of doing this.
let's make this very simple. Let's use Good News Neighbor, that resource that we said. You could do that, say, first and fourth quarter, maybe for Easter, for Christmas, and then you could do the Hope Initiative second and third quarter. That's just one example. If you're doing something every quarter, you are ahead of 99% of churches in equipping people for evangelism.
You really are. And that's a sad statement on the church, but it's true. So yeah, just start small, start, 4 times a year. I think that's a really good rhythm. That will change the culture of your church as well. A lot of people, a lot of pastors don't realize doing a good emphasis 4 times a year, which is very doable for any size church. It starts to change the culture to where you can start doing more. We had at the time of this recording, we had a Christmas event last night at our church, and we took cookies to first responders and foster families, and there was another crazy group that went out caroling. I was not in the caroling group
I am
because the
so
last thing.
glad. There's so many reasons for that.
Well, I kind of set myself up for failure. My wife loves to carol, and so she took her worship pastor, other people, like a group of 50 people went out. It was we had way more. My point is, we were pulling out chairs last night. Like I'm thinking, okay, so we're going to do this event on a Wednesday night. We launch our full Wednesday programming in January. We kind of take a break during December, and how many people would be here? Well, I grossly underestimated my church. We were pulling out chairs. We ran out of hot cocoa. I mean, it was like. We had way more people than we realized that we would have. And so we sent this big group out to deliver cookies into the community, to carol. And that's all fun stuff. That's outreach. But my point is the culture of our church has changed. We've done this enough over several years now where people are like, oh, you're doing outreach. Well, yeah, I'll be there. Now, that doesn't happen
No, it does not.
quickly. It doesn't happen quickly. It takes a couple or 3 years to really build that culture. But since we've been doing this for us almost on a monthly basis now, we do this pretty much. And that's not where I would start. We did not start there. But because we started quarterly and then we moved to monthly, and because we do this a lot, we actually have people show up and desire to do outreach. It's really been great.
So
last
good.
night we had a good time. We had a really good time.
That's really, really good. Well, talk to us a little more about making evangelism a priority, and who do you put in charge of it?
Yeah, I don't. So it needs to be supported and encouraged by the pastor or lead pastor, depending if you have a staff or not. Not every pastor has a staff, of course. Not every pastor is full time. In fact, we got a lot of listeners that are bivocational, co-vocational. So I think it's very important that you train up a layperson to do this, which is why I like our resources. I'm biased there. The Church Answers stuff with Good News Neighbors and the Hope Initiative is because it's video driven, and you can actually, train people digitally with this resource. So I do think it's wise to have a layperson lead this effort. We're called to equip the saints. If you don't have anybody, of course, if you're a pastor, you can do it yourself. Better that you do it than no one does it. But I think
and the resource really
gatekeeper,
helps the leader.
Yeah, the resource does. It walks them through everything. You could even do it together if you really wanted to, walk with somebody as they're equipped. But I'm big on equipping the laity, equipping the saints, and I really do believe that it's best if you empower a gatekeeper to run these programs. It's better for the culture of the church in the long term.
I don't know where this came to mind, but I'm thinking of lay people, and I'm thinking of Brown Church Development Group. Where am I going with this? But when I look at them and I realize the Browns in particular, Todd in particular, CEO, they're lay people in the church, and I hear what they do in the church. And sometimes I think he's like the pastor because he's the CEO of what we believe is one of the best design build firms for churches, for renovation building churches. But I forget sometimes, I don't want to say he's just a layperson because there's no such thing as just, but he's a layperson. And boy, to have people like him in the church, and I bet some of our listeners have people like Todd Brown in the church.
We've utilized their services at West Bradenton, and boy, they were a huge help to us, particularly with our air conditioning project. We have a $2.2 million air conditioning project, and frankly, without their input, it would have been much worse of a project. I'm very grateful that we called Brown.
And I got off topic, but I just wanted to mention that as an example of putting a layperson in charge. He's a great example of doing so. So absolutely love it.
Well, hey, I realize that this is not something that every church does, having an evangelism budget, but I think that it is something that every church should consider. So if you found this of value, I would encourage you to go check out Good News Neighbors. Again, link in the show notes. We've got the Hope Initiative as well, link in the show notes. These are great digital resources to help get you started. Also, you need to just take a moment and look at that budget, examine it. What's in there? What percentages are allocated to outwardly focused ministries? A lot of churches are surprised to find that the bulk of their budget goes to things that are more inward. There are times to do that, and there's good reasons to do those things. But when you can get out of balance as a church very, very quickly when you're not funding and resourcing the outwardly focused ministries. In fact, you almost prevent yourself from doing outwardly focused ministries if you don't resource those ministries because you don't have the funds to get them done. That's about all the time. Go ahead.
And this has been good, Sam. This has really been good. I just really want to go back and summarize, I think, some of the big points as we begin to move on. You got to budget it. That's one big point. You've got to make it a priority. That's another big point. Small is better than none. And 4 emphases will put you better than the top 1%. Hey, and your book, The Surprising Return of the Neighborhood Church, you have become kind of the de facto leader of the neighborhood church movement. I know an entire denomination is looking to you to guide them in many ways through this. So that's another thing that, what's a neighborhood church supposed to do? So I hope we've offered a lot of practical solutions in this. I hope we've given you a little bit of inspiration along with practical resources. But thanks for listening to Sam and me. We never take it for granted. You listeners on the podcast apps, or those of you who are viewing us on YouTube, we never take it for granted. So thank you for being here. As always, thank you, California Baptists, for allowing us to be here. We'll see you in the next episode.